everybody, welcome to the show. Happy Monday, I should say. Around the nation right here, TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you today. Got a great show for you guys. We're going to be talking about a massive smear job, hatchet job, smear campaign, whatever, against our revolution, and specifically Nina Turner. So that's an interesting way to start the week. The establishment is striking back, and it is fascinating. We also have the Democrats' new strategy, fighting corruption. Well, that's an interesting idea, and actually would be a great idea if the Democrats confronted their own corruption. I'm going to talk about that. But we also have updates on Don Blankenship. We've got a new Supreme Court ruling, and we have the new NRA president weighing in on, of course, what else? Video games. Fun. So hopefully everybody had a pretty fantastic weekend. I know I could not get enough of the royal wedding. Yeah, there was actually, no. I wasn't interested at all. But ironically, I did catch a little bit of it when I woke up at about 4 or 5 a.m. with massive heartburn and needed something to put me back to sleep after the Tums kind of kicked in. So, yes, I admit, 5 in the morning, I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, I want to fucking sleep. But it feels like my esophagus is on fire, so I can't really do anything. So, oh, I know, royal wedding. I know. I don't remember anything about it, though, to be honest with you. But anyway, it's going to be a fun show today, guys. So stick in. Stick around, I should say. Wow. Damn. Okay, then. I have the words. The best words. Greatest words ever. Okay. Anyway. So, oh, by the way, I think I fixed that problem. With, I know you guys probably didn't notice because you're like, hot mic, hot mic, hot mic. I know I got a hot mic. I was trying to figure out the problem. I think I actually did figure out the problem. So, we'll see in the break. So, all that stuff you hear me doing is like rearranging the shit on my desk and like putting a keyboard over here and then stick my phone over here and like, oh, I gotta shuffle my papers. I gotta put this thing over here. So, you know, type some stuff like tweets and shit. So I have a lot of stuff to do, and that's what you're hearing during the breaks. Hopefully you won't have to hear that anymore because I can imagine it'd be a little bit annoying. Anyway, so before we start the show, please give us a like and a share. You're going to want everybody to hear these stories today because they're that good. Very, very interesting stuff. So please like and share if you want to get in contact with the show. And support the show at the same time. You can use the YouTube Super Chat function. It's pretty cool. It helps out the show. There's no reason not to. And let me tell you a story that's related to that and why we need stuff like that. So I had an unexpected viral video. It's the first viral hit I've had in like a month or 2 months. And it's still going. It was the Aaron Schlossberg story. So obviously it's a huge story. And this guy, and some updates on that. Apparently there was a taco party at his house. But like outside his house, which was awesome. They hired a mariachi band. So a couple of organizers hired a mariachi band and like put like a taco truck outside his apartment and had a party. But ain't no party like a taco party. So that sounds awesome. But anyway, so I got this viral video. And you know what happens? Immediately demonetized. 60,000 views, demonetized. And they didn't even notify me. And that's the most frustrating part about YouTube. They don't notify you when they when they demonetize your content. So I'm like, what the hell? So the first great video that I had in a very, very long time that broke not only 5,000, 10,000, because before the changes to the algorithm, I would regularly get 5,000, 10,000 on a lot of different videos. So I'd have like videos, 10,000, 20,000 on some of the Trump stuff. Easy. Now I barely break 5,000. If I'm lucky. This broke 60,000 and it's still going. Demonetized. Oh, you can't make money off that. Shutting you down. YouTube. So that's why Super Chat helps. That's why we have to rely on you guys. And huge thanks to everybody who does, who uses the Super Chat, who or becomes a patron. So patreon.com/TYT Nation. That is the one way that you can help the show, and so we don't have to worry about, am I going to get a viral hit so I can pay the bills this month? You know what I mean? So it is frustrating, but anyway, so let's get to the stories. I've wasted a little bit too much time whining about my own problems, and let's get into it. Hold on here. All right. Anyway, Don Blankenship. Now, Don Blankenship is that disgraced coal baron that ran in West Virginia. He ran in a West Virginia primary. Now, he ran against an establishment candidate, and, well, actually two establishment candidates, and he ended up losing the election. A little bit of an upset because there have been people that looked at his chances and said, well, holy crap, this guy could actually win, and he's an extreme candidate. Now, thing is, he lost that primary, and he is, of course, not happy. In fact, he is now going to war with the GOP. Oh, man. Now, Blankenship, as I mentioned, he's a convicted felon. He just got out of prison for conspiring to violate mine safety standards. Now, during his campaign, he's like, yeah, I'm a convicted felon, but it wasn't my fault. No, it was those guys. They ended up conspiring against me to put me in jail for, what I did wrong for ignoring coal dust, which is apparently explosive, and poor ventilation systems. He didn't actually want to spend the money in order to follow regulations to make sure that people, look, if you want to say regulations are a bad thing. That's what Republicans say all the time. Oh, they're job strangling regulations. They're taking our jobs and they're just, they're murdering them. No, the regulations are there so that 29 people don't die in a mining accident when a mine shaft explodes. That's what regulations are for. That's why we have them. That's why we need them. And that's why we put people in prison for violating those regulations. But anyway, aside from all that, right? He's like, no, not my fault. I didn't do it. Somehow you all got together and you made it so that I ended up going to prison. And now the GOP establishment is after me. It's all those guys' faults. It's Cocaine Mitch. Cocaine Mitch. Now, I showed you guys the ad, right? Where he goes after, and he's had a couple of insane ads. One of them talks about Cocaine Mitch and his China people. I'm not kidding. And man, he's an insane candidate. So anyway, he was saying that Patrick Morrisey can't run or can't win in a general election. And that he's saying now that, you know what, I'm going to run third party because I can never support Patrick Morrisey. Mr. Blankenship has now said that he has accepted the nomination of the Constitution Party, saying that it's a natural fit for his views. Yes, natural fit for a felon who hates regulation. Congratulations, I guess it is a good fit. Because nobody the Constitution Party has ever really nominated had much to do with the Constitution, and a lot to do with, well, we don't want to regulate corporations or make rich people pay taxes. Now, what's funny is that this is a way, I think, in his mind, to try to stick it to Trump. He said, quote, "This time we won't get surprised by the lying establishment. We were assured by White House political staff that they would not interfere in the primary election. Obviously, that turned out not to be true." Well, number one, your main issue is trusting anything the White House staff actually said. If you've been following what Donald Trump does, I mean, look, his Trump White House, or his White House's administration says one thing, Donald Trump comes out and says another. My guess is that Mitch McConnell, Cocaine Mitch, goes and went and pulled Donald Trump aside and said, "Hey, listen, buddy. Listen, Donald. We really need your help on this, okay? We really can't have Don Blankenship win. So if you could just endorse his opponent, that would really help us out. And it would help you out, too, because then you would have a Congress that's not full of Democrats." Now, of course, Blankenship and Morrissey, Morrissey now, they're all running against Joe Manchin of West Virginia. So Joe Manchin is already in trouble. He's a corporate Democrat. He's also very, very conservative. Votes for Trump over 60% of the time. He won his primary against Paula Jean Swearengin, who had zero name recognition, not a lot of money, no media attention. The mainstream media would not cover her because they love the idea of Joe Manchin. So, look, it is very likely that when Blankenship says, "Oh, Morrissey can't win the general election," he's actually right, but not for any reason that Blankenship tries to purport. He says, "Oh, he's too moderate, he's too conciliatory with the Democrats, he's too establishment." Well, that's the same problem with Manchin. Manchin is, of course, part of the establishment. He basically is a Republican. So in this race, you have Republican versus Republican, essentially. But at the same time, somebody like Morrissey is so incredibly extreme and, deals with dog whistle racism, basically, with his China people, all that stuff. Look, I think it's very likely that Blankenship is going to be a spoiler in this election. I mean, look, let me go down the numbers here. I think he lost by, he got about 27% of the vote. And his opponents, Morrissey and one other, I don't remember his name, got about 28 and 30% respectively. So if he runs as a third-party candidate, which he is, there's a good possibility that he'll split the vote, and here comes Manchin on an easy win. Now, look, Manchin already was probably going to win in my estimation, but this just makes it easier for Manchin to pull out a win because he's going to divide the Republican vote. The extreme people are going to go with, or likely go with, Blankenship, and then Morrissey will take the more establishment Republicans. I almost said establishment Democrats. It's a weird Freudian slip, isn't it? Now, let me give you a good example of why I think Blankenship actually might get more of that support. There's West Virginia voters, a good chunk of them, that still think that Blankenship is a good job creator. He's going to be a great job creator. In fact, there was one resident who was on video. He said, and mind you, I have to tell you that he lost 3 family members in that very same mine disaster that Blankenship was ahead of, right? He said of Blankenship, quote, "I want an honest crook." That's Blankenship. Well, there you go. I don't think that support's going to go away, considering how much he ran against the Republican establishment. He wasn't exactly shy about this. Again, he ran against Mitch McConnell, and of course, who embodies the establishment more on the Republican side than Mitch McConnell? So, anyway, that anti-establishment feeling is not going to go away, especially as the policies actually put in place by a Republican Congress are being proven to not help these voters. So, look, Congress is incredibly unpopular. Mitch McConnell's incredibly unpopular. So look, I think we're gonna have to watch and see what happens, how much support he can pull away from Patrick Morrisey, and how much support Blankenship ends up getting. If it's significant, watch out. Things are going to get very interesting in West Virginia. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. That's not the right one. There we go. So workers across America have just been handed a huge defeat in the Supreme Court. Now, in a 5-4 decision, the conservatives on the court ruled that employers now have the right to insist that labor disputes get resolved individually rather than allowing workers to join together in class action lawsuits. So basically, the issue here is arbitration. Now, these arbitration agreements, which usually routinely actually get put into employment contracts, sometimes without employees even knowing or noticing, basically means that, look, you have stripped employees of the ability to go and get together and to do class action lawsuits against employers for things like wage theft. So that obviously is bad news for regular workers, regular Americans. Now, it's estimated that about 25 million workers are affected by those types of contracts that bar class action and that force arbitration. Now, unsurprisingly, the conservatives in the court, led by Neil Gorsuch, wrote the decision that massively favors giant multinational corporations. A big surprise. They wrote, as a matter of policy, these questions are surely debatable. But as a matter of law, the answer is clear. In the Federal Arbitration Act, Congress has instructed federal courts to enforce arbitration agreements according to their terms. But wait a minute. The thing that he mentions in the Federal Arbitration Act, well, that kind of runs contrary to the National Labor Relations Board Act, what actually created the NLRB. So that's sort of the central issue to this entire Supreme Court fight. People are saying on one side, look, these kind of arbitration agreements, you can't actually force them to go through with it because that hurts unions and that hurts their ability to be able to go and organize and get together for class action lawsuits. The other side, Gorsuch's side, the conservative side, says, what? No, they work hand in hand. They work right next to each other, and so it doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't hurt the National Labor Relations Board. It actually pits these two agencies together or against each other. So anyway, that's sort of a rough estimate of what it actually is, what's going on. Now, those terms, as I explained earlier, are often not known by employees, the terms of these contracts and arbitration. And actually, in some cases, might be conditional to employment. In fact, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg argued back in October that these contracts were like what they called yellow dog contracts that required workers to forswear union membership. So that's actually a reason why they were outlawed back in 1932. Like, hey, look, you've got these contracts, but you can't actually say you're in a union, or you can't actually become a part of a union because you would be in violation of the contract, which means you can get fired for no reason. Well, now they're putting these same things in the contracts that saying that you have forced arbitration. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Justice Stephen Breyer said a decision for employers would overturn labor law, undermining and changing radically what has gone back to the New Deal. Now, in her dissent, Ginsburg urged Congress to correct the court's ruling against a female employee who complained she was paid less than a man for the same work. So that was one thing that she complained about, and that's part of her strategy. That strategy of getting Congress to fix a decision led to the Lilly Ledbetter Pay Act. Now, she says congressional action is urgently required in order to correct the court's elevation of the Arbitration Act over workers' rights to act in concert. She even summarized her dissent in court, which apparently is rare and is really used to kind of hammer the point home. She said, when workers charge their employees with unlawful conduct, in this case violation of laws governing wages earned and hours worked, there is strength in numbers. And as a result of the ruling, she said, there will be a huge under-enforcement of federal and state statutes designed to advance well-being of vulnerable workers. And look, that is the point. This ruling does that on purpose. See, Gorsuch, he was put there to advance the cause of multinational corporations. He is the most poor corporate judge on the court. This is a guy who once ruled that a man should be fired because he refused to freeze to death by leaving his semi-truck behind. Oh, no, you're supposed to freeze with your truck. No, fuck you. I'm not going to freeze. Oh, yeah? The company says, well, we're going to sue you then. And guess what? Most of the conservatives, all the other conservatives in that court decision were like, no, that's crazy. You shouldn't have to do that. Gorsuch was like, no, you should. The corporations above everything else, above everyone else, corporations are people and they're better than people. And that's why I will always side with them. So rulings like this from Gorsuch, well, look, they're a feature. That's why he was put there in the first place. So that's what he's there for. And look, there's a reason that these companies, which by the way, one of the companies is named Epic Systems, that went and brought this to the court. And there's a reason that these companies love arbitration. It's because in arbitration cases, they almost always win. Cornell University labor law professor Alexander Colvin had looked into a myriad of cases to find out who benefits most from arbitration. And of course, they find out that arbitration happens to serve the corporations, the companies. Using data reports from reports filed by the American Arbitration Association, Colvin's study analyzed 3,945 arbitration cases, of which 1,213 were decided by an award after a hearing, filed and reaching disposition between January 1st, 2003 and December of 31st, 2007. Now, that study concluded that the employee win rate amongst the cases was about 21.4%. So, less than a quarter of the time, employees actually won their arbitration cases. Now, that's lower than employee win rates reported in employment litigation trials, which is 36.4%, so that's almost a third, to 43.8% in state courts, which is almost half. That is significantly lower. Now, furthermore, in cases won, the median award was won by employees. The median award was amount of $36,500, and the mean was $109,858, both of which had to be substantially lower than award amounts reported in employment litigation. Now, they have some examples: $384,223 for federal court litigation, and $595,000 in state court litigation. So those amounts are drastically different. And $36,000 for federal versus $384,000. So, man, when you go through arbitration, you win less often, and you get less money if you actually do win. Furthermore, another finding shows that arbitrators that tend to work on cases for the same employer happen to either rule in favor of the company more often, or rule, if they have to rule in favor of the employee, they end up awarding amounts that are significantly lower than the average. Why? It's because they're the ones who end up hiring the arbitrators. They pay for it. So, look, is it any wonder why they love arbitration and why they want to put arbitration, forced arbitration, into these employment contracts. Is so they can win. And when they do. Now, there's another issue here, and you can't appeal an arbitration decision. Even if you find out that you got much, much less than you actually deserve. Doesn't matter. Once an arbitration is done, you can't appeal. You're not allowed to. So that's why companies all over the United States right now are celebrating this decision. They're like, yes, that way we're going to win more. If we end up stealing your wages and you find out and you come after us, well, first of all, you can't get together with your fellow employees who also got screwed and come after us as a group, which actually makes your case stronger. Nope, can't do that. Now you have to do it one-on-one, where you get, if you even win, which is unlikely now you're going to get less compensation for us stealing your money. That's a disaster. Look, the workplace is stacked against working Americans. The system is rigged against you. Now, I'm sure, of course, that some corporate apologists will inevitably come onto this video and say, like, hey, man, if you don't like it, you don't like arbitration, if your job makes you arbitrate, just find a new job. Just get a different job, man. Well, that's becoming increasingly harder to do. In 2017, 54% of all companies reported using arbitration clauses in their employment contracts. And about 1/3 of those contracts barred workers from banding together and being able to sue when the company does something wrong. So that is a complete disaster. This court ruling also means that we could see the numbers of those companies that use these sort of forced arbitration contracts increase. So good luck finding a job in the near future that doesn't have that kind of contract. And this is only one of the 2 worker-related cases that are before the court. I wonder how they're going to rule on the next one. Look, this is the destruction of the American worker. This is the destruction of the unions. This is destruction of regular working people in the middle class. All for the benefit of the oligarchs. We are not a democracy anymore. We are an oligarchy. They have taken control of our political system. They have appointed people like Judge Gorsuch, which, by the way, Gorsuch shouldn't even be there. Merrick Garland, this was a stolen Supreme Court seat. And as much as I didn't like Merrick Garland, there's a pretty good chance that he would not rule on the side of corporations 100% of the time like Neil Gorsuch. Just saying. So that was absolutely a stolen seat. And look, this is what happens. So Republicans, they play dirty. They steal seats. They appoint people like this. And guess what? Their donors make off like bandits. And now you have no way that you can fight back. They're removing it every single day. Your ability to fight back against these people, your ability to, just get what you deserve for putting in an honest day's work. They want all that to go to the top. And if you don't notice it by now, well, pretty soon you're going to. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a break. Make sure to use the super chat if you have anything to say, if you want to support the show. That, of course, helps us out greatly. We'll be back. We'll have the Politico story, the story about Politico, I should say, and the smear piece against our revolution. So stay right here. Round the Nation. We'll be right back. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation, right here at TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. That helps us out greatly. If you haven't already. So, all right, let's get to the big story of the day. Establishment versus our revolution. Okay. Politico out there with a new smear geese. Let me try this again. Almost said geese. Politico out with a new smear piece against progressives, this time going after our revolution and the head, Nina Turner. Now, let's get into what they're saying. First, they talk about how our revolution is basically falling apart. They're not backing any candidates, and when they actually do back candidates, well, they end up losing. They write, quote, "Our revolution has frustrated Democrats by staying on the sidelines of so many races." For example, they point to Ralph Northam's 2017 general election campaign. Now, Northam, of course, was an establishment, centrist, kind of milquetoast candidate. So it kind of makes sense that our revolution, who is based on Bernie Sanders type backed candidates, and Bernie Sanders type candidates, well, it would make sense if they supported them and not the establishment candidate. So that's kind of a nonsensical point. But nonetheless, they go to Virginia Democratic Party chairwoman, Susan Swecker, who criticizes them. She says that campaign was, to, quote, "the World Series of politics," and they chose not to go to the game. Well, I just told you why they didn't go to the game. Because they weren't actually on the same team. They didn't have somebody who was progressive running in the race. Again, they had Ralph Northam, who was a centrist Democrat. Not something that our revolution tends to endorse. But they get into other races where there are some progressives that have other Bernie Sanders inspired ideals. Well, they didn't support those guys either. They must be a mess. They must be a complete wreck. Well, there are a lot of races where there's more than one progressive. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 progressives. And that's what happens in a primary. And you know what? The progressives will battle each other out to see who is the most viable candidate. And sometimes our revolution will decide not to get involved in those races simply because, hey, man, we're going to let you battle it out. We don't want to pick favorites in this. You go ahead and do your thing. Fair enough, right? But no. According to this article, or according to Politico, well, our revolution, losers, they're falling apart. They're not doing anything. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. Now, they continue writing that it's left the group without tangible successes or to point to allies in power who will be able to help it or Bernie Sanders down the line. So, okay, for one, Bernie Sanders this is an inspired group. This is not actually a Bernie Sanders group. You understand? He's not actually connected to it. He's not actually funding it. Nothing like that. This is not his group. So already they're tying it to Bernie Sanders and saying, look at that. See what they can't point it to any wins or successes that's going to help Bernie Sanders down the line. You see that? It's a complete failure. And it's because of Bernie Sanders. Actually, they're also going to point to somebody else as a reason behind all these failings. But first, in other races where it has endorsed, they write, including for Ohio governor and Illinois governor, our revolution's preferred candidates have lost. Sad. So, look, Ohio... in the Ohio race, Dennis Kucinich was backed by our revolution. Dennis Kucinich did not win. In fact, it was kind of a blowout. He got about 23% of the vote, despite being backed by our revolution. So, hey man, look, when it comes to politics, you win some, you lose some. You run good campaigns, or, you run a campaign. That doesn't guarantee that you're going to win. And you get an endorsement from a group, that doesn't mean you're going to win. That's politics, that's life. But again, they're pointing at these two examples of, well, it's because of this group's mismanagement. That's why they keep losing. Or they have poor judgment. Well, look, as I said before, you win some, you lose some, right? Now, here's where this, of course, turns into a big hit piece, where they claim, essentially, that most of the losses of our revolution, our revolution has not won anything. Well, that's not true. In the races, in about half of them, where our revolution was involved, there's actually was a win. The Our Revolution-backed candidate won. Now, the organization, aside from just pushing candidates, because that's not the only thing that they do, they actually try to spur grassroots progressive action. They facilitated over 11,000 grassroots events and endorsed about 175 candidates, and they've passed about 24 different ballot initiatives. So not only are they putting up candidates, which again, that's what the Democratic Party does. They're like, oh, that's all we do. We put up candidates. But do you do any grassroots stuff? Do you push ballot measures? Do you coordinate events? No. Our revolution does all of that. So I'm sorry if they're not laser focused on getting people elected and then going, okay, on to the next one. That somehow translates into being a loser in your book. Okay, wonderful. Now, you continue. One of the early warning signs came in the Virginia's governor's race. Last year, marquee election, Our Revolution endorsed former Representative Tom Perriello in the Democratic primary and offered to send 2 fundraising emails on behalf of using Sanders' massive email list. Now, they call this the vaunted email list that the Democratic Party wants. And look, they do want it. Bernie Sanders has said, no, we're not going to give over that list. Why? Because it's not going to be useful to you. If if we hand it over to Hillary Clinton or we hand it over to the DNC, most of the people on that list are not going to give you money because they're fundamentally opposed to what the DNC has actually done and will only contribute to progressive candidates. And that would, of course, be a complete sellout. Like if Bernie Sanders gives over his list for nothing, then a lot of people would lose faith in Bernie Sanders, myself included. I'd be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're going to give your list to those guys? What the hell? So he's like, no, of course not. I'm not going to give that list. I'm actually going to give it to Our Revolution. We're going to give them access to it. Now, they said, quote, officials assured the campaign the emails would net between $150,000 to $300,000, according to 2 Perriello aides. However, weeks went by before the emails were sent, and when they were, the total combined haul was about $50,000. Well, that's a lot less than what they had expected, right? $150,000 to $300,000, and actually getting about $50,000 was not a lot of money. So they further will go and point out in this article, well, that's, of course, because Our Revolution is absolutely failing, and it's got poor leadership, and it's not getting involved in all this, these different elections, and they have no coherent structure, and, it's just, it's crashing and failing. It's crashing and burning with an E. Well, let me give you something to counter that. Well, for one, fundraising for the DNC, fundraising for the DCCC has actually also been hilariously low. And there's a reason for that. Now, most people, instead of contributing to these big organizations, are actually contributing to the candidates themselves through small dollar donations, $27 at a time. So now, of course, you can talk to Democrats in these organizations, like how much money can you raise? Can you raise a lot of money through these organizations and PACs? And if you can't, well, then your movement is failing. But that's not true. A lot of these candidates, as I said, are raising money through small dollar donations, individual Act Blue accounts, all that stuff. So that's how more and more people, especially progressives, are choosing to support their candidates instead of giving it to an organization, which sometimes can have little accountability. as evidenced with the DNC. Now, furthermore, our revolution does not take money from wealthy donors. So, at the end of the day, they're not going to raise quite as much. And there are people that are turned off, that are disillusioned, that have given, that were part of the the Sanders email list, that no matter what, they're not going to give money. Because they think, well, what's it matter? Who's it going to? What's going to happen with it? Is it going to get, go to somebody that I don't agree with, etc.? So there's significant actual concerns, right? Now, here's where they go from critiquing the organization for not supporting every single Democrat, which they never said they were going to do, and besides, which isn't really feasible for such a young organization, to now smearing the head of that organization. They said most of what our revolution has become known for in campaigns is an active and often combative Twitter account. Both fans and detractors of Sanders, which is weird, I haven't really seen a lot of fans, but please go on, pin our revolution's problems on Nina Turner, the former Ohio State Senator who became the group's president and public face 1 year ago. So, you see that? It's all Nina Turner's fault. She's taking this organization. She's running into the ground. Really? Oh, that's fascinating. Now, they continue, though some sources involved in our revolution say she's been an effective spokesperson, several others told Politico that they think she's seeking to increase her profile and collect chits to run for president herself as leader of the Sanders movement if the 76-year-old senator ultimately sits out 2020. Oh, so look at this. She might use this. She might be running for president. So, wait, are you saying that a politician can't have political ambition? But what is it that your guys do in the DNC? They all have political ambition. They're politics. They're politicians. It's politics. But anyway, but they're saying that she is mismanaging and not leading the organization at all, and actually just using it as a way to what, get her name recognition out there. Anybody who's ever listened to Nina Turner speak is usually blown away by it. I am, personally. I heard her speak. I was like, holy shit, who is this person? That's awesome. So I enjoyed listening to her speak. I've seen her speak in person. She's incredible. So I think it would be pretty difficult for her to not be able to get some sort of recognition, name recognition, just from her speeches alone. So I don't understand why anybody would think that she would need an organization, Our Revolution, to boost her name recognition. But that's just me, right? But anyway, that piece in Politico goes on to a length to try to give the impression that Turner is using this Our Revolution to boost her own profile, which is funny coming from the author of this piece, who has criticized on day one Our Revolution. But I'll get to that in a minute. Now, they also went after the endorsement process, which is, again, very, very interesting, considering how the National Party does their endorsements, about who gets most money and who can raise the most money and whatever. And again, they go after Our Revolution for not getting involved in some of these races, which had no business having Our Revolution involved when there wasn't a progressive candidate. But yes, even they point out a couple where there was a couple of progressive candidates. Hey, look, not every progressive will get an endorsement from Our Revolution. Sometimes that happens. Oh well. But anyway, look, here's the thing. Here's what this entire thing is about. This is a hatchet job. This is a hit job. This is a smear job, okay, against progressives and against a pretty good progressive organization. Now, is the organization perfect? Of course not. But here it is. Here's this guy saying, look, Sanders, he's going to get hurt by this organization that's flailing, it's falling apart. No, he's not. He's still the most popular politician in America, and he's one of the people that embodies some of the best policies that we have seen come out of the Democratic Party. Because he's the one who's pushing them. And he wants to get the rest of the Democratic Party to be able to embrace Medicare for all, a $15 living wage, free college, regulations in the banks, and breaking up too big to fail banks. If they're too big to fail, they're too big to exist. Most Americans agree with that stuff. So, but nonetheless, they're trying to pin this on Bernie Sanders in an effort to try to, get people to disqualify him. I don't know. But anyway, now let me tell you a little bit about the author of the piece. His name is Edward Isaac DeVere. Now, he is somebody who is on Politico. He has been writing for the company for quite some time. He hosts a Off Message podcast, and he's also a huge Sanders critic. Now, look, you can be critical of Bernie Sanders. I've been critical of Bernie Sanders. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have some valid criticisms. No person is perfect, right? But he's a guy who's been writing anti-Sanders hit jobs since 2016. And a lot of the stuff that he mentions in his article, by the way, just show an organization that's going through a few growing pains. That's all. And yes, this is normal for an organization that's 2 years old. I mean, look at them compared to an organization that's 150 years old. The Democratic Party. So, look, when you have a 40 to 50% win rate on your candidates, and you're organizing and you're sending millions of text messages to people, and you're getting them organized and you're doing grassroots events, I would say for all the problems that our revolution has, they're actually pretty successful. Now, if you want to point them out and say, hey, man, look, they're not a perfect organization, and there's some issues and there's some questions here and there, that's fair. But again, this is a hit job from the establishment. So, now let me get you into why. Now, why here, why now, right? And the catalyst, of course, is the New York mayoral race. New York governor's race between Cynthia Nixon and Andrew Cuomo. Cynthia Nixon just got endorsed by our revolution. Oh, very interesting. Now, last week, he writes, our revolution endorsed actress Cynthia Nixon in the primary for New York governor after she filled out a questionnaire and did an interview with a local affiliate. But an aide to her opponent, Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo, who last year was joined by Sanders at an event promoting a state initiative on the senator's signature issue of free college, said his campaign knew nothing of the process and learned of the endorsement simply from a press release. Oh, that's what this is about. How dare you endorse Cynthia Nixon when our boy Cuomo was hanging out with your boy Sanders? How dare he put the knife in the back of Cuomo when he adopted one of your policies? But actually, and we've talked about this, that policy had a lot of strings attached. So it was kind of a quasi-free college program. Yeah, it's a little bit, and this is indicative of what the establishment is doing. It's a little bit of positive change, but also not really. So it always comes with a host of preconditions and things that you can qualify for, and a lot of incrementalism. But it's being sold as progressive policy, super progressive policy, which in reality it's not. So it is, of course, an inch forward, as the establishment loves to do. But look, in response to our revolution not endorsing Cuomo, which would be insane, because Cuomo is, of course, an establishment candidate, they said, oh my God, how dare you? Beltway Media, attack our revolution. Edward, you love doing hit jobs against Bernie Sanders and our revolution. Go get him. Go get him. That's all this is. So, but even with all that, there is some good news here. And that is when the establishment goes on the attack like this, you know that you're making an impact. You know that you're winning. Oh my goodness. I still have a lot of stories left. Holy crap. Okay. So let's continue going out to the Democratic Party. Because it's all so much fun. Okay. Now, the Democrats are attempting to reboot an old strategy, since, of course, their blue wave has essentially slowed down to a trickle. They're deciding to go after corruption. Let me start that again, actually. Okay. Now, following the news that the Democrats' blue wave has turned into essentially a trickle, the Democrats are now trying to reboot what was an old effective strategy. They're saying that they're going to go after corruption. Well, that's interesting. I mean, that's pretty successful. The American people despise corruption. They're not in favor at all of corrupt politicians. And look, the Republicans have been very successful using the same thing. I mean, what did Donald Trump run on? Drain the swamp. Drain the swamp. I mean, he didn't actually mean it. He said it just played well with the audience. It played well. It plays well with you guys, right? Drain the swamp. Drain the swamp. I thought it was a little corny at first, but now drain the swamp. Okay, well, now the Democrats, they're looking at that and going, that actually works. Maybe, I mean, look, it worked in 2006. That's what they ran on before, even though they didn't actually mean it because they didn't do anything to tackle the corruption. But let me get into the details of this first before I get into that. According to the Washington Post, Democrats are now preparing to highlight allegations of corruption surrounding the Trump administration and a legislative agenda to prevent future abuses as they continue rolling out their party platform ahead of November's midterm elections. Well, now that's interesting, right? So, yes, I think that the Democrats should run on not being corrupt. Yeah, of course they should run on not being corrupt. That should be a central tenet of what it is to be a Democrat, a progressive, right? Yes, we are against corruption, and actually in politics, that's a layup. That's a slam dunk. They have literally lowered the basket so you can just drop the ball in. Yes, I am against corruption. Easiest thing to do in politics. And now the Democrats are finally figuring out, you know what we should do? We should run against corruption. Hilarious, right? What other strange things will they do? Will they actually come out in favor of air and water? It would be interesting, right? But anyway. Actually, I do, to be fair, I think they are in favor of air and water, but only in an incrementalist approach must they protect the air and water. I mean, we have to make sure it doesn't hurt the corporations too much, and they can only pollute just a little bit. Lovely. Now, the article continues. With questions about pay-to-play politics swirling around President Trump and his current and former aides, Democrats are set to introduce anti-corruption proposals billed as a, quote, better deal for our democracy. Again, with the better deal, right? We got a better deal. Really, a better deal than what? We got a better deal than Trump. Oh, now that's a low bar. If I've ever seen one, low bar. But anyway, according to a senior Democratic official familiar with the announcement, the new agenda will include proposals that would eliminate loopholes that allow lobbyists and lawmakers to buy and sell influence without the public's knowledge. Now, that, of course, is an answer to Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen was selling access to the president. And so here the Democrats saying, if you're going to sell access to our politicians, we should get to know. How about having them not sell access? Wouldn't that be a way to stop that from happening? I'm just saying. But no, what we're about is just making sure you know how corrupt our politicians are. Oh, great. Thank you. I mean, at least we know how much money they're taking or what they're trying to do, how much access they're selling, et cetera, et cetera. That's great. Now, the message, they write, elect Democrats in November to clean up the chaos and corruption in Washington. Hey, look, it sounds great and all. And I'm actually in favor of the idea. But how can Democrats talk about cleaning up the House in Washington when they can't clean up their own area that they're in? They can't clean themselves up. I mean, you want to talk about corruption, the Democrats kind of have a corruption problem too. And for one, the DNC takes lobbyist money, right? They still take PAC money. They still take dark money, independent expenditures. They take money from wealthy donors who do not have the public's best interests in mind or in heart. So, look, let me give you an example. There's a recent story in The Intercept by Zed Jelani. Now, he notes that the senators are giving up relatively little money by swearing off donations from corporate PACs. So, this is referring to the recent story where Kamala Harris, and I give her a little bit of credit, and Cory Booker, and Kirsten Gillibrand have all decided, you know what we're going to do? We're not going to take corporate PAC money. Okay. Well, the thing is that we find out later that corporate PAC money was actually a pretty small amount of money that they received. And actually most of their money comes from wealthy donors. According to Open Secrets, 10.37% of Cory Booker's campaign funding has come from PACs, 76% of which are from business PACs. By contrast, 72.12% of Booker's funding is from large individual donors. So, meaning PACs actually gave a very small amount to Cory Booker, amount that he can easily get away with. Now, Kirsten Gillibrand, 6.95% of her campaign funding has come from PACs. Of this, 65% is from business PACs. Meanwhile, 62.5% of her funding has come from large individual donors. Kamala Harris, about 4% of her campaign fundraising has been through PACs, and 40% of that has been from business PACs. By contrast, about 65% of her funding has come from large, wealthy donors. I think you kind of understand what the problem here is that, yes, we can go without corporate PAC money because that's not a majority of what we get. We actually get more money from wealthy, rich donors, individual donors. So knowing this, we can see that, yes, while swearing off corporate PAC money is a pretty good gesture, in reality, it's actually kind of empty. Like, they can easily go without that corporate PAC money. Now, another problem here is with this corruption plan is that the Democrats are targeting corruption that is pretty unique to the Trump campaign. I mean, we haven't really heard of it until Trump came into office. Now, Trump is a special level of corruption because it's right out in the open. It's so nakedly brazen and in your face. So now the Democrats are like, I know, we can go after that super obvious corruption, and then we can avoid dealing with our own corruption. It's a winning strategy, let me tell you. It's a winning strategy. Now, one proposal would tighten federal laws governing lobbying disclosures and foreign agent registration. That, of course, again, is related to Michael Cohen. Let's see. The foreign agent registration actually has to do with, I believe, Michael Flynn. Although there are a lot of people in the Trump campaign that are also considered foreign agents, to be fair. So, now, Democrats will propose to change the law so that any lobbying contract would have to be publicly reported. I'm sorry, this is lobbying contact. So, okay. Hey, look, the corruption is happening. Here you go. Now it's just out in the open, but it's still corruption. Wonderful, Democrats. Another proposal could rewrite federal statutes on what that might have allowed lawmakers of both parties to skirt convictions on bribery and pay-to-play allegations. That include former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, former Senator Ted Stevens, and Senator Robert Menendez. All were charged with fraud violations, but then were acquitted or had their convictions overturned after courts found that their actions were not criminal under the current letter of federal law. Now, that last one is actually pretty decent, but none of that really addresses the underlying corruption of the Democratic Party, in both parties, actually. Look, for one, on the Democratic side, you have superdelegates, right? That is a form of corruption. And that's actually one of the biggest things that progressives are angry about, with good reason. It's completely 100% undemocratic and swings primary elections in favor of the establishment support. So that's a problem. Not only that, but both parties are beholden to large corporations and special interests. In fact, that's what the entire point of the Republican Party is, to basically get more money for rich people through tax cuts and deregulation, right? But Democrats have also voted for deregulation and in some cases tax cuts. I mean, look at the recent bill where Democrats voted to eliminate some provisions of Dodd-Frank. I thought they were proud of Dodd-Frank. I thought that was a big signature accomplishment during the Obama administration. Nope. Turns out we're going to work with the Republicans, we're going to work with Donald Trump, and we're going to gut those regulations so that our banker friends can make a little bit more money. Wonderful. Now, look, there's more. Of course, all the money that they receive from these big corporations, a lot of establishment Democrats will use that money to blanket the airwaves with ads in order to crush progressives who don't have any money to get the same exposure. And I want to point to one of the races in West Virginia, for example. Joe Manchin was running against a progressive named Paula Jean Swearengin. You might have not heard of her. Why? Because Joe Manchin basically buried the airwaves in his own ads, while corporate media never talked about Paula Jean at all. She hardly had enough money for ads. Of course, she was relying on small donors, independent donors. She wasn't getting money from super PACs. She wasn't getting money from the coal industry. She wasn't getting money from the Democratic Party, obviously. And so she could not compete in that race with those incredibly large donors. And there are races all over the country where there's a good progressive candidate who's running on things like clean air and clean water and, a living wage and things like that are getting buried by this special interest money. And you'll never be able to hear them. That's the corruption that the Democrats think is fairly normal. And they're not fighting against it at all. Again, as a party, they have mostly embraced that corruption. That's the problem here. And corruption is also sending out Steny Hoyer to try to convince progressive candidates to drop out of their races, or having the DCCC, who's supposed to be neutral, step in and try to influence these local races, often, of course, having it backfire in the case of, for example, Laura Moser and other candidates. You want to talk about corruption? Again, we know the Republican Party is 100% corrupt. That's the point of the party. The Republican Party is there just to funnel money to the rich. We know that. The Democrats are supposed to be better, and they're not. And of course, in running this, we're now totally against corruption, guys, scheme, the Democrats risk being exposed as hypocrites because of their own corruption that they will do nothing to challenge. That, my friends, is the swamp. Look, Americans are tired of big donors and big corporations influencing our elections and influencing and buying off our politicians. We're also sick of arcane bullshit rules that make it so that people who are more of an independent mind or people who are progressive can't go and register and to vote in these primaries. We're sick of people hiding polling stations messing with registrations, making insane deadlines to register, or having party officials being able to pull the strings and put their hands on scales against other candidates that they don't necessarily agree with and not run a fair contest of ideas. That is corruption. That's the corruption that we're all sick and tired of. And the Democrats will not acknowledge and will definitely not fix because they benefit from that corruption. Trump's corruption is clear. And yes, we do need to do something about that. Of course we do. But you can't just go after his and ignore your own corruption. Because progressive voters and voters across America, they're not buying it. You've got to show that you're against corruption if you want to win people over. And that just doesn't involve flowery language or platitudes. That actually involves doing something. So Democrats, are you just going to give us platitudes? Or are you going to do something? There. I think I'm pretty clear on that one. All right, one more story here. I know we're going really long, and that's what happens, man. So we got one more story for you guys. There we go. So the NRA has a new president, Oliver North. Now, Oliver North is ironically also a criminal involved in the Iran-Contra deal, where he gave guns to the Iranians in exchange for hostages. Wonderful. It's not really relevant to the story, but it's a nice little piece of history. Now, he decides that after the recent Texas shooting, which left 10 people dead, and a nation again asking, why does this keep happening? Decides he wants to jump into the gun control debate. And he said this on Fox News Sunday. He said, the problem is that we've got is that we're trying, like the Dickens, to treat the symptoms without treating the disease. And the disease, in this case, isn't the Second Amendment. Oh, please go on. The disease is youngsters who are steeped in a culture of violence. Now, that's funny. Most mass shooters happen to be white, happen to be young, happen to be male, right? But wait. Those youngsters, they're not women, obviously, who would also be in the same culture of violence. They're not Latinos or African Americans that are also in that same culture, and that who, on the right, many say, no, that culture on in the inner cities, culture of violence, right? Well, they're not doing mass shootings either. So that's an awfully strange thing to say. Now he continues. Nearly all of these perpetrators are male, and they're young teenagers in most cases, and they're white. And they've come through a culture where violence is commonplace. All we need to do is turn on a TV or go to a movie. Or, according to him, and now people defending him on Fox News, for example, Tucker Carlson, as well as many others, all you have to do is just pick up a video game, and that turns you into a mass murderer. Let me give you an example of one of the most ridiculous hot takes from the Texas shooting. This comes from Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Now, he said on ABC News this week, quote, we have devalued life, whether it's through abortion, whether it's through the breakup of families, through violent movies, and particularly violent video games, which now outsell movies and music. But we, again, have to look at our culture of violence, just a violent society, our Facebook, our Twitter, our bullying of adults on adults and children on children. We have to look at ourselves, George. It's not about the guns. It's about us. So here you have the president of the NRA, Fox News hosts, and now the lieutenant governor of Texas, all saying basically the same kind of narrative. It's not the guns. Oh, no, it's not the guns at all. It's the culture of violence. It's video games. It's movies. It's abortions. Well, okay, well, I think you're full of shit, but let's go through and let's talk about those different things. And we'll see whether or not they contribute to this culture of violence that supposedly leads to all of these mass shootings. Okay. First. Okay. Let me give you some facts. Now, they want you to think that it's a culture of violence, right? Especially in media. It's the media that is driving people to murder other people. Okay, well, video games are part of the media, right? Now, let's look at that. According to global marketing firm Newzoo, the 5 countries that spend the most money on video games are China, the United States, Japan, Germany, and the UK. Now, those companies, with the exception of the United States, have strict gun control measures. And they also have, with the exception of the United States, a very low amount of mass shootings. Using data from 2016, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington found that the rate of violent gun deaths per 100,000 people in those countries is 0.06 for China, 0.04 for Japan, 0.12 for Germany, and 0.07 for the United Kingdom. Now, where is the United States at? We are at 3.85. That's a bit of a disparity. I mean, look, all these other countries have violent video games, but for some reason, the United States seems to have a lot more shootings. Weird. Could it be the guns? Could it be the guns? I mean, that's what we're asking. Well, no. No. They're saying no. It must be our lack of religion. We don't have enough Jesus in America, which is comical. Look, I mean, after all, Pew Research Center found that a little more than half of Americans say religion isn't very important in their lives. Oh, man. Just a little more than 50% of Americans think religion is important. That is a danger. That is a moral panic. We are losing our morality. There is not enough Jesus in this world. Well, let's compare this to, well, those other countries we mentioned. And we'll go back to those a couple times. Now, in China, only 3% say religion is very important. Japan, only about 11% say it's important. And the United Kingdom and Germany are both at 21%. Oh, okay, 21%. Fair enough. Okay, there we go. Now, compared to those countries, our level of religiosity is actually pretty high. Well, that's interesting. So we got plenty of Jesus, but we also have plenty of mass shootings too. Weird. Must be something else, right? Well, okay, let's go to abortions. I mean, you can't value life if you're in favor of killing the babies, right? Well, let's look at that. According to data from a study released this year by the Guttmacher Institute, the number of abortions per 1,000 women ages 15 to 49 in the United States was about 13. That's actually the same rate as the United Kingdom. So we're having as many abortions per capita as people in the UK are having. But the UK seems to not have, or rarely seems to have, mass shootings. Okay. Now, there's another country that actually has a higher abortion rate than America and the UK. That's the country of Sweden. Now, their abortion rate is about 18 per 1,000 women. Now, how many mass shootings are there? I mean, if abortion is a big factor in driving people to mass murder people, which I think really makes a whole lot of sense when you think about it. You're killing people. I'm mad because you're killing people, so I'm going to kill people. And it doesn't make sense, but talk to all these abortion bombers and abortion killers. They'll tell you how much apparently it makes sense to them. But anyway, now, how many killings happened in Sweden? About 41 people were shot last year. Shot to death. So that's fatal gun violence. Now let's compare that to the tens of thousands that happen in America every year. Interesting. Okay, so look, maybe it's not the abortions. What about violent movies? I mean, we're running out of things to try to blame it on, right? Well, look, just like the video games, other countries have the same kind of movies, and still, they don't seem to have the same gun violence problem as America. Oh, wait, I know. Here's a new one. And this going back to Oliver North. He says it's the Ritalin. Quote, if you look at what has happened to young people, many of these young boys have been on Ritalin since they were in kindergarten. Oh, okay. Wait, are you saying that girls don't take Ritalin too? I'm sure they do. They don't become mass shooters. In fact, it's very rare to have a female mass shooter who also consumes the same type of video games, music, media, movies, etc. And for some reason, it's not the women that go out and do all these mass shootings either. This tends to be limited to young, mostly white men. Weird. But anyway, he says, no, must be the drugs. Okay, well, let's look at Iceland then, right? Now, Iceland first saw its use of Ritalin, which is used to treat ADHD. I know I used to take it when I was younger. Wasn't in favor of it either. They saw the use jump more than 230% between the years of 2004 and 2014. Now, how many shootings has Iceland had? No mass shootings. No mass shootings whatsoever. Oh, that's fascinating. Now, furthermore, there hasn't been any evidence released that the Santa Fe shooter, which is who we're talking about, was taking Ritalin or any other type of drug. And a 2000 report on school shootings conducted in part by the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center and the Department of Education found that, quote, few of the attackers had been diagnosed with any mental disorder prior to the incident. Additionally, fewer than one-third of attackers had histories of drug or alcohol abuse. So, that kind of covers another one. Mental illness, right? Republicans must have been mentally ill. I mean, what could we do? He was mentally ill. Well, number one, we could actually increase funding towards mental illness, treating it. We could do that. I mean, that would be nice. But no, what Donald Trump did and what the Republicans always do is they cut programs that go to help treat people with mental illness, that help them afford their medications and get the kind of medical care that they need to actually take care of themselves. And besides, that whole mental illness talk, we have as many mentally ill people as a percentage of our population as all those aforementioned countries. And yet, at the same time, for some reason, we seem to have so many more mass shootings than they do, even though essentially all these different factors are exactly the same. And yet, somehow, we have so many mass shootings. Look, if it's not the drugs, what is it? If it's not the movies, the music, the video games, the television shows, then what could it possibly be? I think the answer by now should be fairly obvious. Frustrating. Okay. So that was a bit of a long show. I want to thank everybody for sticking around for the last hour. Appreciate that. I have a super chat to read from Kimberly Buckley. Thank you. She says, if guns don't kill people, here's an idea. Give you 9 bullets, no gun. I'll take a gun with a full clip and one in the chamber. And when I say shoot, let's see who walks away from that situation. I will throw bullets at you. That would be their answer. No, look, anything but the gun. Anything but... No, it's not the gun at all. When really it's a little bit more complicated, but I think the gun has a lot to do with it. The fact that people can get access to a gun very, very easily in the United States, whether or not they have a mental condition, whether or not they have histories of violence. They can just go to a gun show and buy one off somebody in 10 minutes. No background check necessary. Guns? Look, we're swimming in an ocean of guns. Do some of these things factor in? Well, look, speaking of the video games, 80% of mass shooters had no interest in playing video games. One of the last shooters, he was... I read an article where he shot and killed a woman that had publicly turned him down. So he asked her out. She turned him down, apparently embarrassed him in public, and he came back later and he shot and killed her. That doesn't have anything to do with the video games. I think for me that has everything to do with white male entitlement. You could even tie it to the incel community, which a couple of days ago I was like, incel, what the fuck are those? Well, now I know. Now I know about them, and suffice to say, the things that I've seen are greatly disturbing. So, man. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Thank you. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Think about maybe becoming a patron to help support the show. We don't take corporate money here. We don't take PAC money. We don't take organization money. It's all from you guys and YouTube ads. So, and we have been getting crushed by YouTube lately. So if you could help us out, keep us on the air, that is greatly appreciated. All right. Thank you, guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, 218 Nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.